the inherent efficiency of these approaches compared to digging rocks out of the earth and lighting them on fire is going to drive towards better and better and better economics.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the show about optimism, progress, and problem solving all across New England. My name is Andy DeMeo. Today I speak to Sam Evans Brown, Executive Director of Clean Energy New Hampshire, who very kindly took the time to speak to me as he was about to leave for a family vacation. We talk about nuclear power, the energy transition, perpetual motion machines, New England's electricity market, abundance, and a ton of other optimistic stuff. We're also joined briefly by the Communications Coordinator for Clean Energy New Hampshire, Kiana Burgess. Coming up on May 4th, I'll be doing a free live podcast recording for New Hampshire Energy Week at Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, featuring people from Clean Energy New Hampshire, Resilient Buildings Group, and the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. So if you like this episode and want to hear everything optimistic happening in energy around New Hampshire and New England, come hang out with us on May 4th. Enjoy the show. We're here today with Sam Evans Brown, who is the Director of Clean Energy New Hampshire.
Executive Director.
That's right. We don't want to mess that up.
Fancy title.
Clean Energy New Hampshire is the Granite State's leading clean energy advocate and educator, dedicated to supporting policies and programs that strengthen our economy and conserve natural resources.
Nailed it.
Then nothing's missing from that. It's very nice language. Man. All right. So I wanted to talk to you forever. Opening question for you. Do you ever just go outside? Like, it's a beautiful day. We're just outside, looking at our EVs and having fun. Do you ever just go outside and just look up at the sky and be like, why doesn't this power everything?
The giant fusion reactor in the sky?
Yeah.
You familiar with a guy named Jesse Peltan?
No. Did he invent the Peloton?
No, he's a Twitter influencer type.
Okay.
There's a community of people in my world that refer to themselves as solar maxis.
Oh.
So this is borrowed from Bitcoin maxis in crypto world are the ones who think Bitcoin's going to eat everything.
Yeah.
Solar maxis think solar's going to eat everything.
I see.
And Jesse is the online sort of embodiment of that worldview, and he just posts about how there's this giant fusion reactor in the sky.
Yeah.
And solar power is nuclear power, guys.
Right. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're immediately gonna go meta here.
Yeah.
There's really only a couple kinds of energy, right?
Yeah.
You have solar power, right, which is embodied in many different forms. It's the direct radiation falling on the planet Earth, but wind power is also solar power. Wind power is differentials in pressure moving across the landscape that are driven by differences in temperature.
Oh my God.
Right?
It's not just Heat Miser and his icy brother going.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
And fossil fuels are also solar power,
right?
Because they flowed from photosynthesis many billions of years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago, then getting trapped under the earth, and pressure and temperature squeezed it into different forms of fossil fuels. It's stored solar power.
Yeah.
And then there are two more. Number two is moon power.
Hold on.
Which is tides.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like light reflecting off the moon or something.
No. So that's the tides sloshing back and forth is driven by the gravitational pull of the moon.
Yeah.
And the third is nuclear power, which is the decay of radioactive isotopes, that are trapped under the crust of the earth. Which then, if back to the original comment.
Yeah.
In a way, solar is also nuclear because it's
nuclear.
But anyway, so
right. It's all
so
nuclear.
Immediately meta. There's only three kinds of energy, or maybe two, depending on how you slice it.
Well, I guess if you really get into I don't know that the moon, that's crazy to think about, right? That it's a celestial body that's just out there. Gravity is an inherent property, and it's pulling things. So that's a kind of energy, I suppose, that technically might be. But then again, I don't know. Does the sun attract that asteroid that hit the Earth that made the moon.
Yeah, we're gonna find we're just gonna get it down to one. There's just gonna be one form of energy, and I'm not sure which one it is yet.
Right.
But we're gonna get down to the unified theory of one kind of energy.
Well, do you remember? This is making me think of like it. There was a whole craze back, well, like as if we were alive, when they were doing like the World's Fair and stuff in like the Victorian whatever in like the 1800s and all that. There was all this craze for like, we've done it, we've made the perpetual motion machine. And you'll see all these like rigged up contraptions for like, it's a water pourer that pours into one side and then it goes up and pours it again. And it's like, and it looks so elegant and beautiful, but really there's like an electrical, or it's powered by heat or something, right?
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe
it's all a scam.
It's all a scam. Like
yeah. Once we get to the center of the sun, we'll find that there's just a little magical gnome in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Making it all happen.
He's doing it. Or even, well, like people had all these, theories about like Tesla and like all his crazy, and it's this gets at an interesting thing, right? Because like obviously he was a great innovator. He did do like all these things that we rely on with the alternating current and the whole beef with Edison. And then people are kind of like, yeah, but he invented this laser death ray machine that they tried to get rid of it. And if we could just understand. And then David Bowie played him in that movie with the Prestige with Hugh Jackman. And that was a very mysterious, like, I don't know. So that's all to say that like the history of the future, Sam, and the history of maybe energy in particular, because it would have seemed magical to people once upon a time, has always kind of been cloaked in this veil of not mysticism, but like, it's just strange. Like, I don't think that we're adapted to think of it in this way. This like that you can turn on a thing, and we take it for granted now. But
that's right.
The future is always strange.
It's funny. So, I think you've just hit on like on a key paradox of the whole energy problem, which is that it is absolutely essential. And we completely take it for granted. And it's funny, I just had a power outage last night. Some knucklehead drove into a telephone pole down the street.
Oh my God.
And we were without power for an hour or two while we were packing for our camping trip.
Yeah.
And
a
by
good
God,
rehearsal for camping.
By God, did I not suddenly want to spend $12,000 on a backup generator for 1 hour of power outage.
Yeah.
And it makes you realize how tenuous the whole system is. But it really is, there's a again, we're like starting out with very meta universe brain facts, but like I'm
going to ask you a normal question in a second.
So the Western interconnection, which is, all the way from Lubeck, Maine to the Rocky Mountains. That's the Eastern interconnection.
Okay.
I sometimes think I have dyslexia. I still can't figure out East and West.
We'll figure it out.
Is the biggest machine in the world. So the electrons in Lubeck, Maine, going all the way out to Fort Collins, Colorado, are completely in sync. They're all dancing back and forth at 60 hertz in absolute synchrony.
Wow.
Because they have to be. Because if they were not, the whole thing falls apart, and you have a cascading blackout that goes across the entire eastern half of the United States. And we built that machine on, strung together on wires down every street in America before we even fully understood how electricity works. We didn't know if it was a wave or a particle, right?
Huh.
And it's a goddamn miracle.
Yeah.
And we take it for granted every day when we flick on the lights.
I love that. Well, I didn't even know. Like, I knew that, and it's like, again, part of what I want to get at in this conversation, because you're like a real expert in it, I'm just like a layperson, right? Is like this whole notion of like, how do we build out the future? Like, how I feel like we're sucking at it. How do we make it better, faster, right? And like people, they've been studying this as death, but even, this whole book just came out, Abundance, by Ezra Klein.
It's making the rounds.
It's making the rounds, right? I've listened to all of it, every interview they've ever done. And like, I find it pretty compelling, this idea that like, okay, a supply side solution to a problem is a thing we're maybe used to hearing from one side of the political aisle, but if we want to really solve these problems, I think we need to re-examine it a little bit, right? Of like, why does it take so long for transmission lines or different parts of the grid to get built? And, that whole idea of like, we built out so many of the fundamental components of the modern grid in a time when we didn't even know all the science, right? And just, this is probably a romantic reading on those events, but the imperative to build it felt so important.
Yeah.
That
that's
just
not,
like, we'll
that's
figure
not
the details
overly
out.
romantic.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, rural electrification was an imperative.
Yeah.
We needed to improve people's lives, and electricity is the fundamental building block on which, the rest of like
the lifeblood.
Yeah. I mean, just think, there was the whole wave of like, hey, let's try to reduce the amount of domestic labor that women have to do. So let's create vacuum cleaners and washing machines. All that built on electricity.
Right.
And so it is the first step. And actually, it's one of the, I'm a big proponent of the idea that technologies propagate through society at the pace that they, at different paces, but the pace that they need to, based on like the really the demand for them.
Sure.
And rural electrification is one of the fastest changes that society has ever seen when you look at how quickly the U.S. expanded the grid.
Yeah.
So it was an imperative. And I completely agree with the idea, abundance or otherwise, that we need to get back to building. We need to be a society that builds.
Is it accurate to say, Sam, that it's no longer the case that the biggest impediment to more renewable energy getting on the grid, is not money per se, but it's regulatory apparatus? Is that, and less like, how far does the dollar go, per dollar invested? And I hear all kinds of things on that, there's always bills to be like, can we make it easier to, build transmission lines? Like, that's a whole thing that people get into. But like, what's your, where are we now?
So,
do we need to keep throwing a bunch of money at it? Do we need to change the rules? Like, what's the whole enchilada?
Okay, so there's a lot.
That was like question. 7 questions.
But here's what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to tell you that I will forecast that 2024 will be the year in which, 2025, the year that it is right now, which is not last year.
I don't even know.
2025 will be the year in which New Hampshire adds the most solar power in the state of New Hampshire of any year in its history. Wow. And that is in spite of everything you've read in the newspaper.
Right.
And there's a couple key drivers that are pushing that, and we can talk about those each individually. But one of those key drivers, we're going to build the biggest utility scale solar array in the state this year. And I spoke with the developer there, and he's a member of Clean Energy New Hampshire. He's someone I've known for years and years and years. They're about to break ground on this awesome project.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, have you gotten to meet with the governor? And he said, no, frankly, I haven't met her and haven't really thought that we needed to. And I was like, well, you should, because like, you guys are gonna have you're about to dump $30 million into like one of the lowest income parts of the state.
Yeah.
And you should just make sure she knows
right.
you, and you should think about what your ask is when you get in there. And he goes, well, Sam, I got to say, I don't really have an ask for the governor. I just want them to not make our lives more difficult. Stay out of our way.
That's the ask.
And I was like, that's a great message.
Right.
Because, and that's really where we are. Now, that said, that's a utility scale project. We in New England have what's called a restructured electricity market, which is to say that the electric utilities, which are monopolies that are regulated by state regulators, no longer own generation. They're just poles and wires companies. And so we're talking about someone building generation. That's a free market that we have created through deliberate policy choices going back 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
As soon as you get below the sort of like federally mandated market structure and into the state regulation of our monopoly utilities, there aren't markets. And that's actually, in my opinion, an excellent opportunity for bipartisan collaboration, because you will hear conservatives say that they want market forces to dictate what energy we build.
Right.
And you have liberals saying we want to build clean energy. And where those two things align is actually in deregulation and the creation of markets. So if you look at which state is building clean energy faster than any in the nation, it is Texas.
Yes.
And Texas is the state that has the most deregulated, the freest markets in electricity. And the markets are pushing towards clean energy, so much so that conservatives, because we're in the culture wars, are now saying, well, we got to clamp down on this. And they propose this absolutely insane bill, which frankly, fortunately got voted down. Cooler heads prevailed in Texas, and they are going to preserve their free markets.
Right.
but I mean, that's the answer to me is okay, let's look at how we can bring in more market forces that are better aligned with better societal outcomes.
Yeah. In my experience, encountering all these issues, like there's a lot of rhetoric and there's a lot of people who, they still struggle with this idea that like we can make the world a better, more abundant place, and the buck doesn't always stop somewhere, right? Like there's always a negative externality attached to it. I'm not saying that's completely false, right? Like, the materials for solar power have to be extracted, like some ecosystem somewhere has to be disrupted.
Yeah.
You can have a whole discussion about, the supply chains of various products and solar in particular, right? Like there's messy aspects of every part of this thing, every aspect of industrialization or modernization, right? But the whole point to me, which is like illustrated by, the people who study it full time, like Ezra Klein and whatnot, is like that this can be a more elegant trade-off than the one we had before, right? Coal is nasty, oil's nasty, natural gas is less nasty, solar's less nasty, right? Like, you know what I mean?
So what this is triggering for me, you tell me if I'm answering the question that you want.
I'm not even answering. I'm just telling you how I feel. We're all I'm trying to say is it's a cool place where,
there might be a win-win.
It's a true win-win, right? Where like it's better for people. You can make money. There's an economic opportunity. Yeah. It actually reduces our net environmental footprint in the long term, right? And that's not a thing that we're used to. Like the world in many ways used to be a much more Malthusian place. And we have all this evidence now that it doesn't have to be that way. And that's a big jump for people.
So, and I agree completely with your sentiment.
Yeah.
And what I find when I go out into the world and talk to regular people, which I try to do quite a lot, I try to remain a regular person, not just talk to the nerds. Yeah. Is that there are a lot of people who will say things like, well, like electric vehicles are okay, but like nobody talks about the mining for the minerals. Right. Or they'll say, solar power is all right, but nobody talks about how you need to back it up with something, right? Yeah. And that's just not true.
Right.
Everybody's talking about those things.
Yeah.
And actually, if you do a little digging past like what you heard on Fox News, Fox News, you'll find that there's mountains of incredibly smart people thinking about all this stuff.
Yeah.
And yes, there are trade-offs, there are impacts. There is no source of energy that has zero impacts. But net, the clean energy future is one that will have less environmental impact.
Yeah.
And I can cite chapter and verse on this, but I'm going to do two.
Yeah.
One is when you compare lithium extraction and extraction for battery minerals generally, they are, all of the forecasts say that we're going to do a ton of recycling of these materials. So really we're talking about an initial slug of like getting enough out of the ground so that we've got enough circulating in the economy to fuel the new batteries that, by the way, are going to get better and more efficient. We're going to squeeze more miles out of those, out of every ion of lithium that we pull out for the future. But B, if we look at how much mining we're doing right now to extract coal and other fossil fuels, the amount of lithium mining we're going to do is going to be dwarfed by the amount of mining we're going to stop doing.
Yeah.
And similarly, think of shipping. So shipping is what is currently referred to as a hard to decarbonize sector.
Sure.
We don't have a great idea for what is going to be the most cost-effective path to no longer sending massive boats across the ocean, mostly burning bunker fuel.
Yeah.
But if we stop shipping fossil fuels around the globe, that's like, I forget the number, but it's like 60% of global shipping traffic is just moving fossil fuels around the world.
Wow.
Right?
Powered by fossil fuels.
Powered by fossil fuels. Right? So like an enormous slug, and this gets, now you're really getting me going. There's this thing called the primary energy fallacy. So primary energy is like you dig something out of the ground, you burn it, you set it on fire, and some of that energy goes into this service that you're getting from, you're trying to generate electricity, industrial heat, whatever the heck it is, motion. Some of it, most of it, actually just is waste. The engine block gets hot and that's radiated out into the atmosphere. The exhaust gets hot and you're pumping exhaust out. So it's something like 60% of all energy that comes from fossil fuels is rejected as waste heat.
Sure.
And so many folks that I would argue are not thinking hard enough about this issue, including some very influential people, including the person who wrote Vaclav Smil, who wrote a series of books that were very influential for Bill Gates.
Oh yeah.
Have succumbed to this primary energy fallacy, where they say we are going to need to replace every BTU that we mine out of the earth with some sort of renewable energy generation. And when you do the math, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And no, we're actually not going to, because when you stop burning things, 60% loss just goes away. You don't need to replace that,
right?
Because solar, wind, and any other direct form of renewable energy power generation doesn't have waste heat.
Yeah.
So the challenge just got 2/3 easier.
Right.
When as soon as you realize that the primary energy fallacy is in fact a fallacy.
Yeah.
So this is all to say, the world that we're heading towards is one that is actually substantially better.
Right.
And it's going to be easier to get there than anyone thinks. I think it's inevitable. It's just a question of how quickly we get there.
Yeah. No, there's a lot to like about that, and it's fun. Like you're getting at a thing that I often talk and think about with people here, right? Is that like this is what's really complex about talking about like, okay, is the world better? Can it get better? Right? Like I heard someone explain it this way the other day, and this is a funny way. Like, have you heard of this guy Ernest Shackleton, this crazy explorer, right?
Yes.
He's often lauded as like this heroic, he did all this crazy stuff. Everything went wrong in his expedition, and
and they all survived.
Yeah, and they all survived, right? And it's like, whoa, look at grace under pressure, leadership in crisis, like what an adventurer. And then there was this other dude, this like Norwegian explorer who knew Ernest, and Ernest knew him, and he was alive at the same time. And at every step, or like in the planning part of his crazy journey that he's famous for, the other guy was like, you shouldn't do this. Like, don't do it that way. This is stupid. Like, you're going to freeze to death. You're going to do that. Like, and he just ignored all the advice. And, they happened to make it through because of this crazy stuff. But like no one talks about the guy who could have avoided all those problems in the first place, right? And like we have this kind of addiction in the way we tell stories to like people who manage crises as opposed to avert them entirely, right? And so like there's all this avoided suffering in the world that's happened in the past, and prospectively into the future, again, if you think long term, is like an extraordinary opportunity to like make the world better, to reduce the amount of like suck that happens. But we don't think of the things in those terms. It's not intuitive, right? And, to bring it back to energy, I mean, I remember this was like the moment I saw this fact, and I was like, wow, why doesn't everyone like think of this constantly? And I know I'm preaching to you, but like, air pollution alone.
Yes.
Hundreds of thousands of Americans just from emissions from cars, from, emissions from, fossil fuel power plant generation. And like, again, it's the antithesis.
Just to finish the sentence that you didn't quite finish, hundreds of thousands of Americans die prematurely every year.
Yeah, exactly
and
right.
Tens of millions of people die globally every year because of particulate matter, which, by the way, this is Andy and I are speaking on a day in which we are breathing Canadian wildfire smoke here in New England. And because I'm an air quality nerd, because you can't help but become an air quality nerd when you get to go down this rabbit hole. Yeah. We have a air filter in our house. Just having the windows open last night, we had elevated air pollution in our house from Canadian wildfire smoke.
Oh my God.
And that's just the status quo that certain folks would have us just accept. That like, 100,000, a couple 100,000 people a year dying prematurely, that's just the price we have to pay for fossil fuels. And we literally don't.
I reject that.
We literally don't. We can make a better world.
We know better, Yeah, and it's both things, right? They're both true, right? Fossil fuel, it's kind of like lost its meaning because of how much people talk about it. And there's a very good argument to be made, in my view. A lot of these companies, they're examples of the worst aspects of like, corporate profit above all costs, monopolistic greed. Like they have done lots of heinous stuff. Okay. They also
built modern society.
Yes. Right?
And so let's talk about the stuff that like liberals get wrong about this.
Right.
Because there's a lot.
Yeah.
And I actually, the Inflation Reduction Act is a measure that I support it having passed. I don't think we should repeal it, at least not in the way that was proposed in that the version that came out of the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
But it is reflective of what I have seen as a disturbing trend, which is that because of a failure to be able to get bipartisan buy-in to the climate change issue, the environmental groups have abandoned the idea that they can work with Republicans, which has meant that this has become more and more an intractable issue, where you have the Republican Party at the national level cutting off their nose to spite their face because it's become part of the culture wars. And you have giant companies saying, NextEra saying, we cannot build a new natural gas turbine until 2032 because the orders are out so long that we can't build them fast enough. And if you cut off clean energy, we are not going to be able to meet the growing demands of society. And Republicans simply ignoring that because it's part of the culture wars and because that's what the incentives of our political and information ecosystems drive us towards. And I was not, this is a decades-long trend, not one that any individual can reverse on their own, but I think it is a mistake to stop trying to talk to Republicans about this. And I know many, many people are, but I would tell every climate activist, go talk to a Republican friend. Because what I find in speaking to conservatives is that they don't actually... most of them don't actually think that climate change is some sort of communist plot to install socialism. They mostly think that climate change is the thing we got to deal with. It's pretty low on their list of priorities, and they don't want to sink the economy while doing it. And the good news is we don't have to. And we just need to bring them that message and just say it over and over and over and over. As opposed to just hoping that we get more Democrats elected next time.
Hey there, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. If you're liking it, it would mean a lot if you could take a moment to give Granted Goodness a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This is one of the best ways to help more people discover the show. But the very best way to support us is to subscribe at granitegoodness.com, where you'll find an abundance of stories about problem solving, progress, and optimism all across New England. And speaking of cool local people, this episode is sponsored by our friends at Greenwave Electric Vehicles, now with a new location in Salem, Massachusetts. Their founder and CEO, Jesse Lohr, has been an early believer and supporter of Granted Goodness. He even came and rapped at our recent live show. If you're wanting to learn more about electric cars, I cannot speak positively enough about him and the team, and that's saying something because I speak positively a lot. Now back to the show. Nuclear, it's kind of having a glow up right now, right? It's had this whole... this was the thing. I remember it being very in vogue to be anti-nuclear power. And I literally remember, super much love to my professor, Clay Mitchell at UNH, brilliant man who I love, great guy. And I took his class, Advanced Topics in Renewable Energy, and I remember I did this PowerPoint once, and, he was like, this is kind of what I think. Well, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to speak for him because he's way smarter than me and would have a very nuanced view. But I remember writing this sentence of why nuclear power didn't make sense. And the argument at that time, and this was 10 years ago almost, was the science is sound, but the regulatory hurdles make it not feasible. You're going to get more bang for your buck going all in on solar or wind or something, right? And it's just too hard. There's too many barriers for it. But if we could make it work, it's a good idea, right? And so there's all these different pieces of what's the piece you want to bite off? Is it the regulatory hurdle? Have we made it too hard? Is it unsafe? People have all these associations with, the atomic bomb and the whole word nuclear, right? But, now is this very interesting. I mean, they passed this bill last year.
Wait, what did Clay say? I want to know what Clay said.
Oh,
because I know Clay Mitchell as well.
I'm sure
Clay was a former president of Clean Energy New Hampshire.
Yeah, there you go. It's a small world. He I think would have been that's a very reasonable view to take. I mean, he's a great professor. His attitude is hey, find a position and then try and argue it, and like this is an open
think it through hard. Okay.
Yeah, he's a real Socratic individual, as he's a really wonderful guy.
I was curious. I thought the end of the story was that Clay came and cracked down on you for having said something incorrect. But
he probably did. I don't remember. I just remember writing something like that, and now I've done like so much. Like there's been a much more concerted effort, I feel like, to rehabilitate the image of nuclear. Well,
so
we should
there's a real reason for that, right? Which is that when you do energy systems modeling, and which is not to say, so there many solar bros like myself, and I'm guilty of this, point to this single chart when we talk about how awesome solar is, which is called the levelized cost of energy. And that chart is the thing that shows that the price of solar has declined by 90% over the past decade. Blah blah blah. People have probably heard this fact many times at this point. I hope, if you're a Granite Goodness listener.
We'll just come out and say it, and you would know better than me. But like my understanding, the IPCC, this huge, like all the experts and scientists of the world, they look at every aspect of climate change and how it's going to impact, the economy and the energy world. Like they make all these forecasts, and in like 2015 or something, their forecasts at that time, it's all ranges of like, here's our optimistic version, here's business as usual, here's the things don't go the way that we would think. The growth of solar energy in terms of its like adoption or price competitiveness has massively outstripped the most wildly optimistic estimates, and it's happened again and again and again and again. And it's not a story we often hear in the environmental world.
There's a graph called the porcupine graph.
Yeah,
the porcupine graph shows all of the forecasts that, the International Energy Agency, McKinsey, all these really smart, brains on a stick type outfits have done of the growth of solar power. And every time they make a forecast, they would say, it's increasing now, but it's going to level off next year. And so all the lines of the forecasts are flat.
Right.
Meanwhile, the actual adoption curve is exponentially up.
Sure.
And so the hedgehog graph is showing all the spines, the quills are the forecasts that got it wrong.
Right.
And how year after year after year, these very smart people got it wrong, and the actual demonstrated adoption of solar has been exponentially fast.
They're not optimistic enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is a known phenomenon. Solar has blown the doors off of every model every time.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say is that often the reason for that is because of this levelized cost of energy, which is the price of solar has dropped faster than anybody ever predicted.
Yeah.
Largely thanks to, and I hate to say it, but Chinese innovation.
Right.
And it's not just cheap Chinese labor, but genuine innovation in manufacturing processes at scale.
Yeah.
So that's what has driven it, and it took everyone completely by surprise. Now, energy systems modeling is when you say, okay, sure, solar's cheap, but you've got to make the whole grid, all those electrons have to stay dancing in the exact same frequency, or the whole thing falls apart. And how do you do that? Energy systems modeling will tell you that we will save a ton of money if we can deploy more what's referred to as clean firm generation, so dispatchable generation. And the reason for that is that without dispatchable generation, you have to overbuild variable renewables, you have to overbuild storage, and that starts to look really expensive compared to the cost of just the solar panel by itself.
Right.
And so when a model spits out, hey, we can save a ton of money if we can figure out how to do dispatchable generation cleanly, more affordably, a lot of people have focused in on that problem. And there's only a couple of contenders for what is going to be clean firm. It's nuclear, it's advanced geothermal, it's hydro and large hydro to a lesser extent, and it's storage and long duration storage in particular. And storage can encompass as well things like green hydrogen, e-fuels, which I think are probably not going to be as big a piece of the energy puzzle as people think they are or thought they were a couple of years ago. But that's what. So now you mentioned, there's nuclear has a long history, right? So the civilian nuclear power industry from its inception was connected at the hip to the to the military application of developing nuclear weapons.
Right.
And that meant that the anti-war movement glommed onto opposing nuclear power all through the 60s, which then meant that the environmental movement, which also sprang out of the anti-war movement, was anti-nuclear from its inception, which then meant that the climate movement was anti-nuclear because it sprang out of the environmental movement. And it's taken a long time to sort of unwind that whole ball of wax.
Yeah.
And that's not to say there's no legitimate criticisms of nuclear,
Sure,
which there are plenty.
Right.
You know, the Vogtle nuclear plant, which is the only nuclear reactor that America has built in the past 20 years, was announced that it was going to cost $12 billion.
Yeah.
They had several cost overruns. When the thing finally got going, it was $28 billion.
That's a lot more.
So there's this great book called How Big Things Get Done. Where,
Yeah.
And so if for those who haven't, please look it up.
It's a miracle.
They have this great chart of mega projects all around the world, and these consultants have assembled a unique database of mega projects and their announced cost versus their final cost. Nuclear is number 2 on that chart in terms of it's the type of project that has the most cost overruns.
Wow.
And the only thing that beats nuclear, do you know what the only thing that beats
the Big Dig?
No, the Olympics is the only class of mega project that does worse than nuclear power.
Wow.
And so that's the big problem with nukes is like, we got to figure out how to actually build it.
Yeah.
Like if someone could just show me a reactor that has been delivered on time and on budget, I would be impressed.
Right.
And there have been a couple of nations throughout history that have managed to do it. France during their big nuclear build out, South Korea, and to a lesser extent, Russia and China. China's in the midst of it right now. And what they have done is they've picked one reactor design and they've just built it over and over and over and gotten better at it until they figured out how to do it. And America's not good at that. And because what that points you towards is like nuclear needs centralized government to push it if it's going to get cost effective.
Yeah.
And that's not how we tend to do things here. That's my concern.
Well, I've heard the contention, right, that like America has, we're really great at innovating. We lead in innovation in like, many, many different sectors, but on adoption, we struggle a lot more than we used to. Like we used to lead in adoption, but now we don't because of all these different things. And, and I'm glad, there's something to be said, like, again, we could have a whole thing about China, right? But like, this is a thing I think, people are starting to understand more. The idea that there's a lot of value and things to be learned in the actual building of the thing, right? This fetishization of the industrializing and the reindustrializing of America that everyone's talking about. It's a good impulse, but there's nuance to all of it, right? Of what things are we trying to reindustrialize and why and how, but the virtue in just, are we building the thing? Like, is it actually going to exist in the physical world is a good exercise to run through. And
generally speaking, I think at this point, the climate movement writ large, if you were to poll every climate person in the United States, is pro-nuclear.
Yeah.
There's obviously diversity within that coalition.
Right.
But the idea that the environmentalists are stopping nuclear is no longer true.
Right. Anyway, I want to take this opportunity to talk about New Hampshire.
Yeah.
A little bit more.
Which is actually what I do.
Which is actually
as opposed to working on China.
No, well, it's all big. It's all big stuff. Again, like this whole idea of like, there we go.
Ta-da!
Perfect timing. Come on in. We got like 20 minutes left.
Fundraising galore.
No. Here, we have a chair for you right here. We have a microphone. We just solved the nuclear issue.
Yeah, we've just, after 40 minutes, we've just pivoted to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, starting off strong
All right.
with nuclear.
So, who are you?
Who am I?
Yeah.
Big question. Wow.
You're my friend.
True.
I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Granite Goodness.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're Kiana Burgess.
Yeah, I'm Kiana Burgess. I'm the communications coordinator here at Clean Energy New Hampshire.
That's great. I did read your language that you provided to me.
Excellent.
At the beginning.
That my work is not going unnoticed.
No, it's totally not. I would love to hear both of you answer this question. Okay, we're here in the Granite State, and it's cool. Like, I hear all these things my whole life of like, we have the same solar exposure as like Germany, and Germany is installing all these solar panels. Like, why can't we do it here in New England? People say, like, oh, we're not, California or Texas. We don't have the sun. It's like, I don't know, the opportunity may be there more than people think. So like, what is special about New Hampshire in this way? Like, is there something about the way that we regulate our energy system or the way that we do business or whatever, like, why should people be excited about clean energy in New Hampshire?
That's so I'm going to take a first swing at it, Kiana, and then you vamp on what I say. So my answer to that is that, first of all, we have the same solar radiation, actually closer to Spain than Germany. So we're doing a little better than Germany. Our sun's a little better. And our utility bills are so high that the avoided costs are higher than the sunnier part. So solar actually pays for itself faster in New Hampshire than it does in Arizona. And so there's two sides of that calculus. And so that's my quick answer on solar. But the broader question of why clean energy is because New Hampshire doesn't have anything else. New England generally has always been referred to as the end of the pipeline. That's why energy is so expensive here, is we don't have any of our own resources, and they all have to be imported from far away.
Right.
And the clean energy transition presents us a unique opportunity to make it here.
Right.
To use what New Hampshire does have, which is the wind, the sun, biomass to a certain extent, to generate what we need for our economy.
Okay, hold on though. Can you explain, like, we have some nuclear power plant around here, don't we?
We have Seabrook Station, which
what is the deal with that?
Seabrook Station was the last nuclear power plant to be built in the sort of waning days of the previous nuclear power boom, and it's also, many would argue, was the site of the sort of death of the American nuclear energy industry because of the Clamshell Alliance, which was the activist group that pushed back against its construction, and because of as we talked about before. The cost overruns bankrupted Public Service of New Hampshire, which is really what led to the restructuring of the utility industry in New Hampshire. But New Hampshire was the first state to restructure nationally, so it was the leading edge of utility restructuring nationally. And all that really stems from the failure to deliver a reactor on time and on budget, which some people lay at the feet of the Clamshell Alliance. I think it's a more complicated story. I think it's endemic to the nuclear industry writ large, is that they can't deliver reactors on time and on budget.
Is it on? Is it generating power?
Yes, but they never built the second reactor.
Okay.
So it is half the size of what was planned. And there's still actually a tremendous amount of transmission overhead where you could build a second reactor there. And that has made it a very attractive site for potentially interconnecting offshore wind into the New England grid.
What a beautiful, I like how you framed it. Like, again, I think it would be easy to look at that and be like, look at it. It's a giant dead end. It's a giant, half-finished dome of concrete or whatever is down there now. But instead it's like, no, this is a commentary on the future. That could be, that might have been, that wasn't, but we have agency. We're not helpless, right? So I really like how you I had no idea about any of that. Like, I knew that there was some reactor there, and that we get something from it maybe, but this is what I'm talking to you.
10% of New England's power comes from that one plant.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
That's great.
And sorry, like, you got me going.
This is your whole life.
But that, trade-offs, right? The fundamental benefit of nuclear power is that the footprint of that plant is quite small versus the extensive impact of trying to provide that same amount of energy or power, which are two different things, through renewables. And it's all trade-offs.
All right, Kiana, what's going on?
Yeah, well, I would just say also, I think that there is an emphasis in New Hampshire on local power, local opportunity, trying to make sure that things are working for communities in the context in which those communities are set in. There's some things that might work in North Country that wouldn't work in the Seacoast. And so really trying to see with clean energy, what is the opportunity to build things that support those communities in a way that helps economically or from the community perspective in their municipal buildings, really thinking about those ways of emphasizing that clean energy is an opportunity that can help these communities build differently. And I think that that's just something to really consider when you're looking at how we get our energy. There is opportunity to build, but I think it needs to be done in the right context. So that's what we focus on here, is those stories and how we can continue to kind of build that out.
Well, it's both. I'm glad you mentioned that. Again, like, this is the fun of the energy stuff, right? Is like, it can be both things. It can be the grand, national project to build 1,000 nuclear reactors, with a standard design type, and to have big grid system, big transmission line. I think somewhere in Iceland they have the transmission towers, and they made them shaped like giant people. And it plays into like the folklore of like the ice giants. It's like, why don't we do that? We could make it shaped like the old man of the mountain. Like we should. I mean, this is a whole other conversation of like, can we breathe like myth and cultural history into the inspiring infrastructure of the future? Like I'm projecting my own like solar punk vibes here, but I don't know. There's something to be said for that. And we obviously have this tradition, this very strong tradition of local, direct democracy and community involvement in New Hampshire. And, energy it's the grand things, but it's also solar panels in your backyard, right? Like,
and they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
And I find this even within the energy errati world, where you have people who are like, oh, utility scale is the way to go, or like residential is the way to go.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's both and there's a great study from a gentleman named Chris Clack, who's an energy systems modeler, and his model is built slightly different than everybody else's, but what it pumps out with the conclusions that it reaches is that when you build local generation that's right at the source of consumption, what that does is it frees up. It means that like you're no longer having to draw from the grid, which then frees up that grid capacity for other things. And that happens at the very local scale in your little circuit, your feeder in your neighborhood. And then if you zoom out and if everyone's doing that, what it means is that you're freeing up the capacity on the transmission system, meaning that you can build more utility scale stuff, because the transmission system is no longer as constrained because you've cleared up that congestion by building local renewables too. So they aren't mutually exclusive, despite the fact that some people want to drive the conversation in that direction.
Right. Well, it's an interesting, again, like this is something I know nothing about, but like we got solar panels put in, up
Let's go.
Yeah, no, we did it, well, because it just made sense. Like you mentioned earlier, part of what makes it a compelling investment here, right, is like, the electricity is expensive.
Sure is.
Right. And even, we're in a high interest rate environment right now, but the math still worked, and, we're trying to do, it's both, again, like there's a values argument to be made. Like I'm an environmentalist at heart, and I personally am okay and even a little excited to be like, can I deploy a little extra effort and of my personal capital to like try and reinforce this incentive system that I think is a better net positive for the world, for the environment, for the economy, right? But it also makes money, like it's what is right in my view and what is economic are aligned in this really unique way. I have the advantage of being able to think longer term, but
I think you're making the great case of like you start to look into these projects and you see that there is that benefit, whether it be economic or something personal that you want to be, getting your energy more from solar panels rather than, from gas. Like you see that kind of first step and then you start learning more about it and it just opens up a different world to know about, electric vehicles and such. And so I think it really does kind of start you thinking in a different way, and that's important to recognize.
Well, it's an aesthetic thing as well.
They look great.
Yeah.
which some people, and that gets, values, right? Because some people don't like how they look, but I think we need to try to shift that. And I whenever I see solar panels, a well laid out rooftop array on a home, it's just like, that looks sharp.
Yeah.
But I mean, to your point, that they in New Hampshire, and I know New Hampshire better than any other market, but in New Hampshire, rooftop solar on a good roof that has good exposure and not too many trees, definitely performs better than sticking your money in a savings account.
Right.
Some of them perform better than sticking your money in the stock market.
Wow.
On a 25-year basis.
Yeah.
And so the idea that solar is expensive is just out of date.
Right.
It's a money maker, and it's a part of a diversified portfolio of what you do with your capital. And so many people look at it as like an amenity. And they're thinking, well, $25,000 on a solar array, that's so expensive, and I don't even. But it's like, no, it's an investment.
Yeah.
It's an investment, and it's gonna make returns over its life. And we talked a lot about solar, but the economics of energy efficiency are even better.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's a no-brainer. Some of these efficiency measures, 2-year payback.
Right.
And then you're just printing money after that, in savings.
Yeah. You got to go on vacation in a couple minutes.
I do. But you should hang out with Kiana.
Yeah, if you want to stay and keep talking to me, we'll let Sam go in 6 minutes. because then we'll have him for an hour.
He's on the clock.
No. I mean, he's being very accommodated. Like, he's about to go get out of here. Just to be clear, the people at Clean Energy New Hampshire work very, very hard, and they're really smart and awesome. And I hope that's the impression that people get. But Sam,
but vacation's an important part of being a productive member of society, because you got to recharge those batteries.
He actually is like overwork. Like, he's supposed to like be gone the whole day, but he is a very nice guy and is squeezing me in today. His family's out there eating donuts, and thank you to Sam's family for who may or may not ever listen to this. Well, I hope when you get in the car and you go on like this wonderful family vacation that hopefully they'll be like, did they talk him out? Did they is Dad gonna talk to us about
because they don't want to talk to me about my stuff. They're like, oh God, Dad's talking about energy again.
So maybe this is a consideration. You're like, I know if I go and I talk on the podcast for an hour, then I won't have to explain primary energy to my wife for the 10,000th time.
I won't try to talk about the distribution system operator white paper that I've been reading before bed each night.
Yeah, exactly. It's spicy reading. Yeah. All right, Sam, you have always said to me in the times that I've met you and interacted that you are like a congenital, unbreakable, unabashed optimist. Why? Like, what does that mean to you?
It's physics.
Yeah.
It's just physics. I mean, we talked about this a bit already, that I think the inherent efficiency of these approaches compared to digging rocks out of the earth and lighting them on fire is going to drive towards better and better and better economics. And the efforts that are underway right now to sort of like raise the walls and turn America into a petro state, I think will ultimately just fail. Right. And what it's going to come at our international competitiveness. We're going to see our market share in the global economy decline if we don't lean into these future technologies. And so it really is, we're mortgaging our future to these companies that are legacy companies that are in decline. Right. And I think ultimately that's my feeling of the politics of how we got to where we are that we have an industry that is in the fight of its life and is trying to do what it can to hold on to a couple more years of the good times.
Right.
And that's going to be at the expense of our future.
Right.
Fortunately, I was just listening this morning about the latest turn of the screw in Washington, D.C., and I think that as a congenital optimist, I'm hopeful that cooler heads will prevail.
Yeah.
And there'll be a recognition that if the United States is going to remain a leader, that we cannot forsake the clean energy transition and watch as the rest of the world goes in that direction, and then we are dragged along kicking and screaming 20 years later.
Yeah. And New Hampshire can't stand idly.
Well,
either.
and this is, to me, New Hampshire sort of actually the diamond in the rough, where we are a red state at the local level. All the House, the Senate, and the governor are Republicans, and we get a lot done with them. And I think it's just a question of approach. It's a question of willingness to have conversations with people who probably don't agree with you on 100% of the things that you talk to them about.
Right.
And just doing it over and over and over.
Yeah. Well, even the framing, again, like you've been very clear in every interaction I've ever had with you in this conversation, right? Of like, you explicitly reject the framing, right? Like you reject the idea that there is something unattractive in conservative ideology to the offerings or opportunities afforded by the clean energy transition, right?
That's right.
Like,
that's right.
It's there really is so much to like and to dig into, and people sometimes, like, I get why they feel this way. Like, politics is, you make different arguments to different people and you concede it's slimy. I don't know. I think if you're doing good work you believe in, there's something very virtuous about it. I really believe in this, and I want to understand where this person is coming from, where their constituents are coming from. I want to meet them where they're at and try and find a win-win.
Yeah.
And that's like what you do here. So
yeah,
I think it's great. All right.
Thank you.
Time to go.
Have fun.
Good vacation.
I'm gonna.
Thank you very much, Sam. Kiana, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
This has been great. Hey there, thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Granite Goodness is made possible through the generous support of our community partners, Resilient Buildings Group and Greenwave Electric Vehicles. We're also supported by our Optimists Club, the community of paid supporters to Granite Goodness, all of whom share our belief in highlighting local stories that are substantive and optimistic, granite and good. If you like what we do and want to support us, please subscribe at granitegoodness.com, consider joining our Optimists Club, or leave our podcast a rating or review. If you have any good news story tips, would like to suggest a guest for the show, or just say hi, please shoot us a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Until next time, I'm the creator and host of Granite Goodness, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.